The Whitmore mansion stood on the edge of rural Pennsylvania, its blackened windows staring out at the forest like the empty sockets of a skull. Locals swore the place was cursed. They told stories about people who entered and never came back, about the walls moving like a living creature after midnight, trapping anyone foolish enough to stay. Most dismissed it as small-town ghost lore, but to me, it was the perfect chance to prove everyone wrong. I'd been running a small horror exploration channel on YouTube, and I wanted a real scare, something that would pull in views. So on a cold October evening, I packed my camera, flashlight, and sleeping bag, determined to spend the night inside the mansion. I didn't believe in shifting houses, but by the time the sun rose, I'd learned just how alive a house could be. The driveway was nothing but cracked gravel and weeds. My car's headlight swept over the massive silhouette of the Whitmore mansion, revealing peeling paint and warped wood. A cold wind howled through broken shutters, making the place seem almost awake. I parked and stepped out into the biting air. The front doors loomed at least 10 feet high, their faded red paint flaking under my touch. With a groan, one of them swung open on its own. I told myself it was the wind, but a shiver ran up my spine as I stepped inside. The entry hall was enormous, wide staircase curving upward into darkness, a chandelier hanging from a chain so rusted it looked ready to snap. My boots clicked on the marble floor, each step echoing far longer than it should have. The air smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. I explored for hours. The dining hall still had a long table, set with dishes coated in grime. The study was lined with books whose pages crumbled at the touch. Upstairs, bedrooms lay in decay, broken beds, torn curtains, and dressers left open as if someone had left in a hurry. At 11:30 p.m., I returned to the first floor and spread my sleeping bag in the drawing room. I figured I'd get some rest before midnight, before the time the so-called shifting was supposed to happen. Outside, the forest swayed in the wind. Inside, it was utterly still. I woke to a sound. Not the creak of settling wood, but something heavier like furniture scraping across a floor. I sat up, heart pounding, and checked my phone. 12:01 a.m. My flashlight beam cut across the room, and I froze. The doorway I had walked through earlier wasn't there anymore. In its place was a wall. I stood, panic clawing at my chest, and ran to the opposite side of the room, expecting the hall to be there. Instead, I found a narrow corridor I didn't remember. The scraping sound came again, closer this time. I followed the corridor, hoping it led to the entry hall, but it twisted sharply, then again, leading me deeper into the house. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing strange symbols carved into the wood beneath. At some point, I realized I was walking in circles. I passed the same toppled chair twice, but the walls around it kept changing, sometimes wood-paneled, sometimes brick, sometimes plaster. My flashlight flickered, and in that moment of darkness, I heard a whisper right next to my ear. "Stay." I spun around, but no one was there. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed as I searched for an exit. Every time I turned a corner, the layout was different. I came to a hallway lined with mirrors, each one warped and cloudy. My reflection lagged behind my movements by a second, then smiled when I didn't. I smashed one of the mirrors with my flashlight. Behind it was not a wall, but another room, lit by a single candle. I climbed through the jagged glass frame, cutting my hand in the process. Inside the candlelit room was a small wooden table, and on it, 3 framed photographs. Each showed a different person, a young woman, an older man, and a boy around 12. All of them looked terrified, eyes wide as if staring at something behind the photographer. My stomach dropped when I noticed the background in all 3 photos. It was the exact room I was standing in. The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed me whole. I turned on my flashlight, but its beam barely reached a few feet ahead. From somewhere deep in the house, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, getting closer. I ran. Hallways twisted under my feet, doors opened into brick walls, and stairs led to ceilings. The house was moving faster now, almost as if it was guiding me somewhere. My lungs burned, my legs shook, but I couldn't stop. Then I entered a room I hadn't seen before. It was massive, circular, with walls lined in faded red velvet. In the center stood a grand four-poster bed. Lying on it, pale as wax, was the boy from the photograph. His eyes darted toward me, and he opened his mouth to speak, but before a sound came out, the walls behind me slammed shut. The floor trembled, and the bed began to sink into it, dragging the boy down. I lunged forward to grab him, but an invisible force shoved me back so hard I hit the wall. When I looked again, the bed and the boy were gone. The room began to change around me. The red velvet walls faded into rotting wood, the floorboards curling upward like claws. I could feel the house breathing, slow, steady, each exhale rattling through the walls. In the corner, a door appeared where there hadn't been one before. I didn't hesitate. I threw it open and found myself in the entry hall again, the front doors just ahead. Relief surged through me, but when I reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. Behind me, footsteps echoed. I turned and saw shapes emerging from the shadows, figures with empty eyes and slack jaws, their skin grey and cracked like old plaster. They moved slowly, but I could feel the air thickening, pressing me toward them. I slammed my shoulder into the door. Twice. On the third try, it burst open, and I stumbled out into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I looked back once, just in time to see the front doors of the Whitmore mansion swing shut on their own. The footage from my camera was mostly static, though a few frames showed warped hallways and shadowy figures. I posted the video online, but most viewers thought it was staged. Only one comment stood out, a username I didn't recognize. It read, "You left the door open. We can find you now." I moved out of Pennsylvania a week later. But some nights, when I wake in the dark, I swear my bedroom door is in a different place than it was the night before. When Emily and Mark Thompson bought the old farmhouse on the outskirts of Vermont, they were eager to escape city life and start fresh. The house was a rambling two-story with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch, standing lonely at the edge of thick woods. It had been empty for years, and though it looked like a fixer-upper, Emily was enchanted by its rustic charm. But the realtor gave them a warning they couldn't ignore. The attic door was sealed shut, nailed, and locked tight, and no one had dared open it in decades. "Some things are better left alone," she said quietly, casting a nervous glance at the roofline. They had laughed it off, thinking it was just superstition. But from the very first night, the house seemed to hum with something sinister. Emily was the first to notice the lullabies. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, a faint melody floating down from the attic, like a ghostly mother singing to a child long gone. The lullabies came in the dead of night, soft and sorrowful but with an undertone that chilled her to the bone. She'd lie awake, frozen, listening as the song filled the old wooden beams. Mark dismissed it as the creaking of the house or wind sneaking through cracks. But Emily knew better. Nights passed, and the lullabies grew louder, more desperate. Sometimes, she could swear she heard a soft, childlike giggle mingling with the tune, laughing at her, beckoning her. One night, Emily woke to a scratching sound, as if tiny fingernails were clawing from the other side of the attic door. She shivered and pulled the covers tight, unwilling to face what might be trapped up there. The next day, Emily tried to pry the door open. The nails were rusty but strong, almost as if someone had sealed it with an unnatural force. Mark tried to calm her fears, insisting they focus on fixing the kitchen instead. But Emily's unease grew. The air around the door seemed colder, as if the house was breathing frost. Curious and desperate for answers, Emily went to visit Mrs. Caldwell, the elderly neighbor known for her knowledge of local law. When Emily told her about the lullabies and the sealed attic, Mrs. Caldwell's eyes darkened. She told a chilling story. Decades ago, the farmhouse had belonged to the Whitman family. Their infant daughter had died mysteriously, and in her grief, the mother had sealed off the nursery in the attic, locking away the crib and the child's toys. Since then, no one dared enter the attic, for the house seemed to trap the child's restless spirit, singing its mournful lullabies to anyone who would listen. Many who stayed reported nightmares, waking to find shadowy figures watching them from the corners of their rooms. That night, the lullabies began anew, louder and more agonized. Emily lay frozen in bed, unable to look away as shadowy shapes crept along the walls and the temperature plummeted. The door to the attic suddenly creaked open by itself, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Compelled by terror and curiosity, Emily crept up the narrow stairs alone. The attic was suffocatingly cold and dark, filled with forgotten furniture draped in white sheets and cracked toys scattered on the dusty floor. In the far corner stood an ancient cradle, rocking slowly despite the still air. The lullaby echoed, surrounding Emily like a shroud. She saw a flicker, a small pale figure with hollow eyes and tangled hair staring at her. The child's face was twisted in sadness, her mouth opening to sing the haunting song once more. Emily tried to flee, but the door slammed shut behind her, locking her in complete darkness. She stumbled, heart hammering, her breath visible in the freezing air. Suddenly, the music box from the floor began to play by itself, its chilling melody intertwining with the lullabies. The little girl's ghost appeared again, reaching out with cold, transparent hands. Emily screamed, struggling to break free, but the spectral child whispered, "Stay with me forever." The walls seemed to pulse, closing in as ghostly hands emerged, clawing and pulling at Emily's clothes and hair. She fought with all her strength, tears streaming down her face, until the door finally burst open. She tumbled down the stairs and fled into the night, the lullaby ringing in her ears long after she reached safety. Mark searched the next day, but the attic door was sealed again, the padlock mysteriously replaced. Emily never returned to the house, and rumors spread that anyone who dared open the nursery never came back the same. Locals say if you pass by on a quiet night, you can still hear the soft lullabies drifting from the attic, calling for a new child to join the restless spirit trapped inside. When Daniel and Rachel Morgan purchased the old Harrington house in upstate New York, they were convinced they had finally found the perfect place to call home. The two-story Victorian, nestled on the edge of a quiet forest, had all the charm they desired: a wraparound porch with weathered wooden railings, stained glass windows that caught the morning sun in brilliant colors, and enough space inside for the family they hoped to start. The realtor had mentioned the house came with a bit of history, but assured them nothing unusual beyond rumors of a family who had abruptly left decades ago. For Daniel, leaving behind his stressful corporate career meant starting fresh in a peaceful setting, while Rachel saw the house as the sanctuary they'd been dreaming of for years. Neither of them gave much thought to the subtle unease the realtor's glance held as she handed over the keys. Moving in on a bright Saturday, the air inside the Harrington house carried a faint scent, dust mixed with something sweet, like old perfume that lingered long after its wearer was gone. They spent the day unpacking, arranging their belongings and imagining their future together, but as night fell and they finally settled into bed, the house seemed to settle with them. It was then, just as Rachel was drifting towards sleep, that she first heard it, a soft murmur coming from the wall behind their bed. At first, she thought it might be Daniel talking in his sleep, but when she turned toward him, he was breathing deeply and evenly. The sound was faint and muffled, like someone whispering through a mouthful of cloth. Her heart quickened as she sat up, straining to catch the words, which remained just out of reach, a rhythmic, hurried conversation she couldn't quite understand. "Daniel, do you hear that?" she whispered. He stirred but denied hearing anything, suggesting it was just the pipes creaking in an old house. Still, Rachel found herself unable to fall asleep, the uneasy whispers echoing in her mind long after silence returned. By the third night, Daniel could no longer ignore the voices. Sitting in the living room amid the half-unpacked boxes, the faint murmurs began again. This time, the words were clearer, chilling in their desperation. "Still here, I can't leave." Daniel's head snapped toward the wall, eyes wide. Rachel nodded, her face pale. They pressed their ears against the faded wallpaper and realized the voices were definitely coming from inside the walls. They were layered and overlapping, male, female, even what sounded like a child. Rachel shivered and stepped back. "Maybe there's someone trapped in there," she suggested. Daniel shook his head, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "That's impossible. These walls are solid, no crawl spaces, no ventilation ducts big enough for a person." The whispers ceased abruptly, replaced by the faint hum of the refrigerator. The following day, Rachel was tending the small garden when an elderly woman approached from across the street. She introduced herself as Margaret, her voice rough but kind. "You're the new folks, hey," she said. Rachel smiled and confirmed. Margaret glanced at the Harrington house and then back at Rachel. "That place hasn't held tenants long since the Johnson family," she said softly. "You should be careful. At night, you might hear things. Don't listen too closely." Rachel's stomach tightened. "Why?" she asked. Margaret lowered her voice further and whispered, "Because they want you to join them." Before Rachel could press for more, Margaret turned and walked away, muttering under her breath. That night, Daniel, still skeptical, set up an old audio recorder in the living room hoping to capture some evidence of the strange sounds. The next morning, they played back the recording while eating breakfast. For hours, the tape was silent except for the usual ambient noises, until suddenly at 2:13 a.m., faint voices emerged from the static, whispering fragmented phrases like "they can't hear us yet" and "find the key." Then, a child's distant giggle echoed through the recording, making Rachel's blood run cold. Daniel tried to rationalize it as radio interference, but Rachel refused to accept such an explanation. Over the following days, the whispers grew louder and more insistent, sometimes calling Rachel's name directly. One stormy evening, a particularly loud whisper seemed to beckon them toward the basement. The air there was damp and heavy with mildew. Behind an old, rotting wardrobe, Daniel noticed a section of wall that sounded hollow when he tapped it. With some effort, they pried away the broken wood and uncovered a narrow, dust-filled passage. Their flashlights barely penetrated the darkness as they stepped inside. The passage ended in a tiny hidden room, containing just a rusted metal bed frame, a cracked porcelain doll, and a stack of yellowed newspapers. The headlines were chilling: "Harrington family missing, police search continues," and neighbors report strange noises from residents. The articles detailed how, in 1963, the Harrington family, a mother, father, and their young daughter, had vanished without a trace. Neighbors reported hearing screaming in the nights that followed, but the police never found any bodies. Returning upstairs, the whispers seemed to envelop the entire house, no longer faint but echoing from every wall, floor, and ceiling, claiming "you found us" and promising "we can be together now." Grabbing Rachel's hand, Daniel insisted they leave immediately. However, the front and back doors refused to budge, and all the windows appeared to be sealed shut as if glued in place. The lights flickered, and in the brief moments of darkness, Rachel thought she saw translucent, anguished figures lurking silently in the corners of rooms. They fled upstairs, hoping to find another escape route, but the whispers swelled into a deafening chorus demanding they stay forever. Daniel forced open the master bedroom door but froze at the sight before him. The bed was no longer theirs, it was the rusted frame from the hidden room in the basement. On it lay three pale figures, a man, a woman, and a little girl, who simultaneously opened their eyes, revealing endless blackness within. Rachel screamed as the walls began to close in, the wallpaper stretching like living skin. Cold, thin hands emerged from the walls, grabbing at their clothes, hair, and skin with terrifying strength. Daniel shoved Rachel toward the hall, shouting for her to run. She stumbled, scrambling to her feet, and sprinted to the front door, which this time opened as if by some unseen force. Gasping for air, Rachel ran into the street, glancing back only once to see Daniel was gone, the house once again silent and dark. The next day, police searched the house but found no sign of Daniel, only Rachel's belongings neatly packed at the foot of the stairs, as if she had never lived there at all. Within a week, Rachel moved to another state, trying to escape the nightmare. Yet, late at night, she still swears she hears Daniel's voice, not from the phone, not from outside, but coming from the walls themselves.